All right, well, welcome guys to this lesson of Renew. And in this lesson, we're going to talk about the false belief of I can't help being depressed or hopeless unless my circumstances change. And this is a heavy one. And I think it's something that a lot of us deal with. Sometimes we deal with hopelessness and depression. And as Christians, it's hard to even talk about it because we feel like as Christians, we're not supposed to deal with this. Yeah. And so to get started, I just want to share a quick personal story. So about 2 years ago, I woke up one morning and I felt like I couldn't go on or didn't want to go on. And it was a heavy moment. I remember sitting up in my bed and swinging my feet to the floor and just like sitting there in bed. And I did not want to do that day. I did not want to get up. I didn't want to go to work. And I remember God just speaking to me right there in that moment. He said, "Austin, I need you to start hoping again." And I knew right away what I needed to do. And I knew that I needed to start imagining and painting a better picture for my future and to have that vision for my future. And so there's a verse I want to share with you, and it's Romans 4:18. And this is what it says. Even when there was no reason to hope, Abraham kept hoping. Now there's something I want to point out in this verse. You see the word hope used twice. Yes. And the first one is, there's no reason to hope, but Abraham kept hoping. And I believe this is representing two different types of hope here. The first one is natural hope, and the second one is biblical hope. And so let me just show you a quick comparison of what these two hopes look like. So the first one is natural hope. This is what natural hope sounds like. It might happen. Whereas biblical hope is a confident expectation that it will happen. Natural hope is daydreaming, it's escapism. Biblical hope is vision. It's propelling you into your future. It's that substance for your faith. Natural hope it'll weaken under trials. I don't know if you've ever noticed this, but if you're hoping for something and you're not sure it's going to happen, if something comes against it, your hope for it will weaken. Yep. And then biblical hope strengthens under trials. Next is natural hope leads to disappointment, whereas biblical hope will lead to your appointment. The next is natural hope focuses on point A. It focuses on where you're at today, whereas biblical hope focuses on where you see yourself going, the dreams God's put in your heart, where you are headed. And the last thing is natural hope partners with your logic, and biblical hope partners with faith. So natural hope partners with I see this happening, therefore it's going to happen. Yeah. But then biblical hope is, I don't even see how this is going to happen, but I'm going to continue to believe by faith that it is going to happen. I'm going to stand on those promises. And so let's go back and look at Romans 4:18 again. And so it says, the full verse says this: even when there was no reason for natural hope, Abraham kept having biblical hope. He kept believing those promises, believing that he would one day become the father of many nations. For God had said to him, that's how many descendants you will have. And so what's happening right here is this is something that God said to Abraham. And I want to take a look at what God said. This is quoted directly from Genesis, I believe Genesis 15. So let's take a look at that. So to give you a little backstory on this, God comes to Abraham and he says, Abraham, I'm your rewarder, I'm your protector, I'm going to look after you, I have all these amazing things for you. And Abraham almost goes like, hey, big deal. Like, I don't have an heir. When I die, all my possessions are going to go to someone outside my family. What good are your promises? And God gave Abraham this vision to hold on to. And he said, look up and count the stars if you can. That's how many descendants you will have. And so God gave Abraham a picture that he could look at every single night of, this is the promises, this is the promise I've given you. Your descendants will be as numerous as the stars in the sky. And that happened because he held on to it. And the amazing thing is, God even asked him to sacrifice that promise once it came. He asked him to sacrifice Isaac, and Abraham was willing to do it because he had so much belief and so much hope in that promise that he was able to put to death the promise even when it came, because he knew God would bring it back to life. And another thing is that I absolutely love is in Romans 4, it also talks about how over time his faith didn't diminish, it actually grew. And so even though it took 20 years for this promise to come, the promise of the child come, his faith grew. Even though he was getting older, even though in the natural everything was shifting where it looked like it wasn't going to happen, his faith continued to grow. His hope for that continued to grow. Yeah. I want to show you guys another character in the Bible, Joseph. So when we look at Joseph's life, we see this. One night, Joseph had a dream. So Joseph was a dreamer. He had tons of dreams. And in these dreams, he saw himself ruling over his brothers and ruling over even his parents. And he would share these dreams. But if you look at Joseph's life, after he had those dreams, right afterwards, things just go downhill. Yeah. Like he gets sold as a slave. He gets resold to Potiphar. He gets accused of raping someone. He gets thrown into prison. All these things just keep going down. Not only that, he's left there in prison for years. He's left there for years. And there had to have been so many times where he's like, God has completely forgotten about me. My dreams were wrong. My dreams were wrong. I have no reason to hope. But he didn't do that. And this is why I believe he didn't do that. Because in prison, there were two people that came to him and they said, oh, we had dreams last night. And he was willing to interpret the dreams. Yeah. And if he would not have believed that he had prophetic dreams, he would not have been willing to interpret those dreams. And if he didn't believe his dreams were from God, he would have had no confidence to interpret those dreams. And so even after those years of not seeing anything in the natural to believe in, he continued to hope for what God had promised. Yeah. Let's look at another one, David. David is anointed as the king of Israel. Samuel said, this is the one, anoint him. So from an early age, David is anointed the king of Israel. That's a sweet setup. Oh, yeah. Yeah. If that happens to you, you're going to believe you're going to have your life made. Right. And not only that, shortly after, he kills a giant, and the whole nation loves him. Yeah. And he's actually serving the current king of Israel. Everything looks like it's going his way. He's kind of apprenticing almost for that position. Yeah. But then something happens. His boss gets envious of him, and he flips on him. Yeah. And no longer does it look like that promise is going to happen. He's running for years in the wilderness. He's hiding in caves. His boss tries to take his life multiple times. And even up until the point where everything, when he's out at war, everything is taken from him. Everything, his wives, his kids, every single possession he has is taken from him. And the amazing thing is David was able to continue to believe in God's promises. And you look at the contrast of David. In the natural, when you're anointed as king, you would believe, I'm going to be living in a palace. My life is going to be made. But he's hiding in caves. But even throughout that, and we get the amazing picture in the Psalms is how much he believed in the faithfulness of God, how much he allowed his promises to stick with him, even when he didn't see it come into fruition. Yeah. And let's look at another one. So Jesus. When Jesus came to earth, this is what it says about him. Because of the joy awaiting him. Because of the joy awaiting him, he was willing to endure the cross. And so let's take a look at Jesus' life. Jesus comes to earth, and he's around human beings, which is probably a struggle in and of itself, a challenge in and of itself. You're a perfect person, and you're living with a bunch of imperfect people. That's a problem in and of itself. But when he was entering in his passion, one of his people closest to him betrayed him. Sold him for 30 pieces of silver. And one of the three people closest to him denies him 3 times on the night when he's being betrayed. Not only that, his team has fallen asleep on him when he's asked him for them to pray. Everything is going south. He gets beaten. He gets whipped. He gets a crown of thorns put on his head. And then he dies a gruesome death. Yeah. He does all these things. And if you think about it, Jesus knew his whole life, his destiny. Yeah. He knew what he had to do. Yeah. And if I was to go 33 years or 30 years knowing what my destiny was, and that it was ultimately to die a gruesome death, that would be so hard. Yeah. How was Jesus able to do that? Yeah. And this is the key, because of the joy awaiting him. And he saw you, and he saw me, and he said he saw that there had been a veil that had been separating us, and he wanted more than anything to tear that down. He saw that intimacy that he was going to be able to have with us. That was enough motivation for him to continue and to go through that trial that he had to go through, which is incredible. And so there's one more person I want to talk about, and that's you. I want to talk about you. What are you believing for? What do you believe God has put in your heart? What are you holding on to that you feel like has not come to pass, and that it's almost waning and you're having a hard time believing for it, and you're focusing or having more of a easier time being hopeless or depressed? And so I want to read a verse with you in Habakkuk. It says this. It says, write the vision and make it plain on tablets, so he may run who reads it. And guys, it's so important that you know your vision for your life. If you're going to have energy, if you're going to have the passion to be able to do what you need to do, you have to take hold of those promises God has given. You have to know what God has promised you, and you have to keep that vision in front of you at all times in order to do what you're called to do. And so you may be wondering, what if I don't know what God's vision is for my life? What do I do if I don't know what that is? And the amazing thing is he's given us his word. He's given us his word. And in 1 Samuel, it says this. It says, and the word of the Lord was rare in those days, and there was no frequent vision. And guys, when you are not getting the word of God in you, you will lose that vision for your life. I think the amazing thing about this course is we're renewing our minds, and one of the benefits is we'll know the perfect will of God. And so if you're struggling right now, you're like, I feel so hopeless, I'm not sure what God's even promised me, I feel like God's never spoken to me personally, get into his word and take those promises captive for yourself. So another question you might be wondering is, how do I know if what I'm hoping for is the right thing? How do I know if what I'm hoping for is from God? And I think one of the easiest ways to determine if what you're hoping for is the right thing is it bigger than you? It's got to be outside of you. It can't be about, I want to make more money, I want to be more well-known, I want status, I want this job because I think it'll make me happy. It'll be so much easier to go through life and to do life well if you make your why bigger than you. And so I just want to go through a few of my whys for you guys, because for me, like even this morning when I got up, I started thinking about these things, like, why am I doing what I'm doing today? Why am I doing that? And so here's some of my whys. The reason why I save my money, the reason why I invest, the reason why I do certain things with my finances, I one day see myself having a family to provide for. And I don't only see my finances as my finances or even my family's finances, I see what I've been entrusted with blessing other people. Another reason, why do I give 100% at work? Why do I go in every day and work hard? Because I know what I'm doing helps other people. And some days I don't get to see those people, but I believe regardless of what job you're in, you have the opportunity to serve someone, and you can make whatever you're doing bigger than you. You can make it about the people you get to serve. Another reason, why do I work hard? Here's an amazing one. God says if you're faithful with the little that's before you, he's gonna give you more. And I know if I do with what I have in front of me right now, with all my heart, God is going to bring more and going to entrust me with more. And when I'm able to do that, I'm going to be able to impact more people. That's enough motivation to continue to do what I'm doing. If that's all the motivation I have, that's good enough reason to do it. Why would I believe for healing in my body? What's the reason for that? Because I believe that when I am healed, I'm going to have that faith to see other people healed. I'm going to be able to pray for other people and see them healed. Why do I want to live a sanctified life? Why does that matter to me? Why is what we're doing here, why does it matter? Because it says, without holiness, no man will see the Lord. And I want to see God. I want to know him personally. And not only that, I want other people to experience the freedom of what a sanctified life brings you, the peace, the joy, the love, the life that comes from it. And in the Bible, there's so many of these verses that start with like, rejoice when you run into trials, and they're not easy verses to handle, because in your mind you're thinking that's so contrary to the way you should think. But James writes about it, Peter writes about it, and then Paul writes about it as well in the book of Romans. And so let's look at what it says in Romans. It says, we can rejoice too when we run into problems and trials. We can rejoice. That's crazy. For we know that they help us develop endurance. And endurance develops strength of character. And character strengthens our confident hope of salvation. And this hope will not lead to disappointment. That's good. So why in life do we experience hard times? It's so that we can develop hope. It's so counterintuitive, and it's completely different than the way the world feels about things. The world feels if everything's going right, then I can hope. No, as Christians, our job is when everything's going wrong, when we have those trials, that's when we get to activate our hope. And the thing the enemy of your soul wants you to do when the hard times come is he wants you to be hopeless. He wants you to be depressed. That is the easy way out, and that's the best possible case for him. But God wants you to activate your biblical hope. God wants you to continue to stand on his promises. So, and you may be wondering, like, because the trial gets so big sometimes in your face, does God have a good plan for my life? Well, I just want to say to you, God does have an amazing plan for your life. He says that his plans are for good and not for evil, to give you a future and a hope. But in order to do that, you're going to have to go through trials. It builds your character, it builds your capacity, it builds your hope, and it shows God in your life. It shows, you get to that point where God becomes your source, and you have to rely on him more than anything else.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So I just want to encourage you, if you're facing a trial right now, stop running from it. Like, face it head on and go after it. I love the phrase, if life hits you, you hit back. So go back after it. And so I want to encourage you that you have been given the ability to overcome every single obstacle in your way. And so right now, if this is something that you're dealing with, I want you to get out the Renew chart, and I want you to go through those verses that we've outlined and really start to activate your hope. And I want to pose to you the same question that God posed to me in that morning when I got out of bed. He said, Austin, I need you to start hoping again. And I need you guys, I need all of us to continue to hope, because God has amazing plans for our lives, and it begins by believing his promises.